when we talk about the question of what the U.S. and other countries can do, the fact that the president said that he wants his administration to look at the full range of possible actions that can be taken against Libya, this is, if nothing else, a signal that the U.S. government is very concerned about what is happening inside the country. However, a senior administration official did tell reporters a short time ago that it's simply not a matter of the U.S. acting unilaterally or any other country acting unilaterally, but they do note that this is a situation where the U.S. does not have the same depth of relations with Libya that other countries, notably members of the EU and other countries in Africa, may have, and so the U.S. is trying to leverage, as it were, their relationships in order to try to stop the bloodshed inside Libya.
Rosalind, there were suggestions earlier on that the U.S. may be considering sanctions. Did Obama allude to that in any way, shape, or form?
Not in a very specific way, Doreen, but officials at the State Department did indicate throughout the day on Wednesday that things such as reimposing sanctions, which had been lifted on Libya in 2004, could possibly be one option. Another option that's being looked at is the possibility of freezing the assets of the Libyan government, of particular individuals affiliated with the government, notably Colonel Gaddafi. And there's also the question of whether or not there should be any sort of legal action. And certainly that's going to mean that we have to pay very close attention to developments around the Human Rights Council meeting in Geneva on Monday, which Secretary Clinton will be attending. There is a growing sentiment in the international community that whatever happens, that Colonel Gaddafi in particular and members of his regime need to be held personally accountable for the injuries, for the deaths of the people in Libya, a situation which they're hoping they can stem in the few days ahead.
What I picked up on, Rosalind, I thought was quite interesting, is that we didn't actually hear Obama mention Gaddafi by name, did he?
No, he has not, and it was only under a bit of pushing from reporters today at the State Department that you actually heard officials there mention Colonel Gaddafi by name. This is perhaps a recognition that this is not simply a matter of perhaps making the leader a martyr, as he has tried to apparently paint himself as in the past 48 hours, but again trying to actually try to say that they recognize that there is some growing schism within the Libyan government, and simply identifying the leader by name, in their view, is not the way or the most constructive way of trying to bring about a peaceful solution.
All right, Rosalind, thank you very much for that. We can now go back to Edward Luck. He joins us from New York, and he's the UN Special Advisor on the Responsibility to Protect. Mr. Luck, thank you for staying with us on Al Jazeera, and apologies for having to cut you off earlier on, but we had to listen to what President Barack Obama was saying about Libya. And let me ask you about that, in fact. What's your assessment so far of how the White House and the US has handled the situation in Libya?
Well, I always hesitate to comment on an individual member state, but I think this is a case where the U.S. voice really blends with all the voices we're hearing around the international community. It's really been part of the chorus. It's not a solo act by the U.S., and I think that's a very healthy thing. And
Ban Ki-moon, what do you think of the way that the UN has been handling the situation? Because there are some concerns that the UN has not yet come out with concrete action towards Libya to stop the violence and the killings.
Well, in my view, the Secretary General has been quite outspoken on this issue. He also, as you know, had a 40-minute telephone conversation with Colonel Gaddafi, in which he made very clear the concerns that he had and the larger international community has. So it seems to me the Secretary General is playing his role, trying to get the message directly to Gaddafi about what the international community expects and the kinds of standards that leaders of states have to perform in these kinds of cases. States were created to protect people, not to persecute them. And certainly when you order aircraft and random fire and bring in mercenaries against unarmed protesters. You violated so many international laws, and clearly he has to be held accountable, and others in his regime do, for what looks like, at least, crimes against humanity.
We heard Ban Ki-moon speak earlier this evening, and in fact he said that there will be a Human Rights Council meeting on Friday, and then the situation will be watched day by day. But can the current situation afford this type of rhetoric and this wait-and-see approach? We're getting reports of more than 1,000 people killed so far.
Well, you have to look at the alternatives. Is anyone calling for an armed intervention, which could in fact make a difficult situation that much worse? There might be sanctions that one might think about. There might be efforts to cut off arms, to try to stop mercenaries from crossing the borders. There's various things that could be done.
Why are these things not being done yet? That's the question. The question is, why are these things not being done yet?
Right. Well, first you have to build an international consensus. You have to assess the situation. And it seems to me the fact that the Security Council did release a consensus statement yesterday that cited the responsibility to protect is a step forward. It may take time to get all the countries on the Council to agree to more specific measures. And it's very difficult when you watch a situation like this and you want some instant solution. But that doesn't tend to happen. Obviously, the regime is very entrenched. It's very reluctant to back away. It has various military assets, financial assets on its side. The protests are rather disorganized. So I think you have a rather chaotic situation, and it takes time to put that back together. And I think it's better that the international community act together rather than individual countries going this way and that. And it's better to act in a deliberate way. But the first thing you have to do is give a very direct message to Gaddafi and his associates about what is expected by the international community. When you have the Arab League, the Organization of the Islamic Conference, the African Union, the EU, the UN Security Council all saying basically the same thing, the message is loud and clear. He has to know, and his associates have to know, that they are very much isolated in the international community. Now, they may simply adopt the bunker kind of mentality, but they have to realize they don't have any good way out here.
Do you think that crimes against humanity are being committed in Libya?
Well, we don't obviously have direct access, but there's certainly good reason to believe that they've been committed.
From the reports that you've heard,
people have died, maybe even over 1,000. From the reports, it certainly looks that way. I don't know how you can
and what
command
scope is there for Gaddafi
civilians
to be held accountable for those?
Well, first and foremost, he will be held accountable by the people of Libya, and I don't think we should forget that. The international community really is trying to stand by the people of Libya. Second of all, there could be tribunals set up in this particular case, or there could be the International Criminal Court that could come into play. So there are certainly legal remedies, but first and foremost, there are political remedies and moral remedies in terms of how he is viewed by his own people, how he is viewed by the international community. He's not getting support from anyone who at least would speak publicly internationally. Everyone recognizes that the kinds of acts